Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'll be running through my transfer tips ahead of Gameweek 23. Welcome back everyone to another video. Now today, I'll be running through some of the hot topic players that we're all discussing and considering either buying or selling or potentially holding ahead of Gameweek 23. If you did enjoy today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could just drop a like, and if you're new around here, hit subscribe as well if you enjoyed the content. Let's start off by talking about a couple of the Man City midfielders, namely Phil Foden and Cherki, both of which got 45 minutes in the Manchester derby, which is far from ideal. And I think a lot of us are wondering whether or not now is the time to sell, despite the fact that the next fixture up is Wolves at home, which is one of the best fixtures in the calendar. What I will say is that Wolves have looked much more defensively robust recently, but it's still a small sample size. I still wouldn't have them as one of the best defenses in the league, even if in the last 4 or 5 game weeks, their data has been one of the better defenses in the league. Over the season, they're still one of, if not the worst team. They're still, I think, only on 8 points. They're a team that you do want to at least look at targeting. So I would be reluctant to sell any players if I thought that they were going to start at home to Wolves. Let's start with Phil Foden. Now, obviously, came off after 45 minutes, at least started the Manchester derby, but came off at halftime. Pep mentioned that it was his decision. It wasn't injury-led. However, since then, we've seen him leaving the stadium with his hand very heavily bandaged. And then since then as well, we've had a press conference stating that Pep said that he broke bones in his hand, but that he's actually fine for making the squad for the midweek Champions League tie, and he's been named in that squad as well. So I think if I was reading between the lines, what's happened there is Phil Foden didn't have the best of first halves against Manchester United anyway, got brought off at halftime because he was managing a little bit of an injury. They didn't know what it was at the time, but he was clearly struggling with something, might have mentioned it at halftime, and Pep was like, you know what? You're not at your best. We're not going to take any risks. Let's bring you off. And obviously, they've got plenty of firepower on the bench that they can bring on and hopefully change the game. Didn't work out. And obviously, the second half went against Man City. That might actually play into Phil Foden's hands when we look ahead to game week 24, if indeed he is okay to play. But the odds look pretty good considering it's a hand injury. You can bandage that up. You can get through that kind of injury and still play matches. It's not ideal, of course, but considering he made the squad for the midweek Champions League game, he can't be that far away from fitness. So I would be reluctant to get rid of him, given that the information we've got right now is that he can probably play through it. He might not be at his best, and there's clearly an argument to say that he's been pretty poor recently anyway. I think that's 6 blanks in a row in the Premier League. But it is still a very good fixture. After Wolves is out of the way, I'd be much more tempted to sell. Spurs away from home, Liverpool away, Fulham at home. I'm personally almost certainly selling him for Bruno Fernandes in game week 24. But I did mention in an earlier video this week, I am considering Bruno in for Foden. For me, though, I can only do that with 2 free transfers. I definitely wouldn't be doing that, especially considering Bruno's fixture is Arsenal away this week. And Foden, if he's fit, Wolves at home is much better. So if for whatever reason we get news that Foden isn't going to play against Wolves for certain, then fine, have at it. I think selling him makes a lot of sense because Wolves is the only reason we're really holding on to him. But if he's fine for that fixture, I think it can wait another week. As poor as he's been, it's Wolves at home. His data's actually not been that bad. In a few of the recent game weeks, he's been quite unlucky not to get something. I think just the distribution of points has been quite stark. It's been quite incredible to see. I think it was 5 weeks in a row where he hauled, followed by 6 where he blanked. If you just mix those together, you've got a perfectly viable FPL asset. It's just the way the points have been distributed. Moving over to Cherki, I would be much more reluctant about. 6.8 million. He is cheaper. The data's actually better when he's on the pitch. 0.75 XGI per 90. The downside is I just don't think we can guarantee that he's going to start. And there are just so many top quality midfield options or even wing options at Man City now that as good as he's been, I just can't guarantee you that he's going to play against Wolves. I think with both of these players, I wouldn't be making any moves until after the Champions League game. If Cherky starts and plays 90 minutes in the midweek, I'd be quite worried about his minutes against Wolves. But if he maybe comes off the bench, gets 30, or even just plays 60 in the midweek, that might indicate that they're resting him up a little bit for the weekend against Wolves. And let's be fair, Man City haven't been great recently, so they're going to want to put out their strongest possible 11 against Wolves to get back on the front foot. They're 7 points off in the league right now. They can't afford to take risks. So I think we'll get a lot more information from the Champions League. I wouldn't sell either of them yet, but if I was trying to read between the lines, I think Cherky is the one that I'd get rid of first out of the two, because I'm much more worried about whether or not he will start in game week 23 than I am with Phil Foden. Foden, I'm relatively confident, but obviously things can change throughout the week. Okay, so there's another Man City player that I wanted to quickly mention. Mark Guéhi has now signed for Man City. Looks like he'll probably go straight into the starting 11, right? Because they've so far been playing with a fairly bare bones back four. They've been rotating a little bit, but there's no question about it. Man City have pulled the trigger on this move early in the January transfer window rather than waiting until the summer when he's out of contract. They could have got him for free. Obviously, the contract isn't free, but you know what I mean. No transfer fee. But they've pulled the trigger early to guarantee that they get him, not another club comes in and grabs him off of them. But also because they kind of need him right now. Gvardiol's out for a little while. Ruben Diaz is out for a little while. Guéhi, surely, is going to come straight into the starting 11. He is a fantastic centre-back. I've got very few doubts about whether or not he's going to be a lock 90-minute man on the regular for Man City. The only question I have is Guéhi at 5.3 million. Is he still as good a pick as he was at Crystal Palace? He's obviously owned by a lot of managers anyway. That is dropping quite quickly. I think largely because a lot of players have 4 Man City players in their team right now, so you've got to sell one before you can make any other moves. So Guéhi, it does make some sense to get rid of him. But I think if you've got him in your team right now, you hold on to him for Wolves at the very least, because that's a good fixture. After that, I'm not sure I'd be rushing towards him, honestly. 5.3 million, it's relatively cheap for Man City defenders, but he's going to rarely ever get DEFCON now, and he was fairly good at it at Palace. But in the Man City system, we've seen with most of their defenders, they rarely hit DEFCON, and it's a system defense. So I think Guéhi's just going to lose a lot of that DEFCON. So that's 2 points a week, or maybe one every other week that he's going to lose. The XG has been good, as has the XA, but is that going to drop a little bit at Man City? Possibly, because they're going to use him in a slightly different way from set pieces as Crystal Palace did. And Crystal Palace really leaned on him from set pieces, especially from those long throws. He was the first man to get the flick on, and he was there in the centre of the box to get any drop downs as well from corners and free kicks. Is that going to be the exact same system at Man City? Probably not. It might still play into his favour, and he might still be a relatively good goal threat from set pieces, but we can't guarantee that anymore because he's in a different system altogether. So I don't think he's a bad pick all of a sudden. 5.3 million is decent value for a 90-minute nailed Man City defender. They're a good defence at the end of the day, but a lot of the reasons why I liked him previously might no longer be the case at Man City. He'll probably keep a few more clean sheets, but he's probably going to lose the DEFCON, might not have as much goal threat. I think after Wolves at home, I would personally be looking at moving him on if I did already have him, sorry. If I didn't have him, obviously it's tempting to buy a fairly cheap Man City defender ahead of Wolves at home. After that, I'm not that convinced I'm going to need him. So look, fine to hold, maybe fine to buy this week, but I'm not that convinced that he's going to be that much better than he was at Crystal Palace anyway, and arguably recently he wasn't all that great at Crystal Palace either. So let's move on to talking about Cole Palmer, who surprisingly enough got his biggest haul of the season in game week 22 against Brentford at home. The thing that's most surprising about that is it was only a 9-pointer. He still hasn't picked up a double-digit haul this season, which is kind of mad when you think about the quality of the player that Cole Palmer is. It just goes to show how much he struggled with injuries this season. But also when he's been in the 11, he hasn't ever really done all that much. And honestly, if you are basing your decision on whether or not to buy Cole Palmer in the next couple of game weeks on game week 22 and his performance in that match alone, I would say he's an avoid. Yes, he scored the penalty, but outside of that, it was a pretty poor performance from Chelsea, but also from Cole Palmer, who, if you look at the heat map across any FPL or football website or app, he was playing pretty withdrawn and very, very wide. It was not an impressive heat map whatsoever. Obviously, he scored the penalty, so that kind of glosses over quite a lot, but it wasn't a great performance. And many people are already talking about this, but at the end of the match, he looked like he was in a lot of pain, heavy strapping in the area where he was injured previously. Is he going to be able to continue playing 90 minutes a match? He did so in game week 22. I'm not confident, or at least not convinced, that he's going to be able to do that all the way through this fixture run. It's a great fixture run, so the temptation is absolutely there. He's differential, and we know what he's capable of when he's at his best. But if you take a look at Chelsea's fixtures, not just the Premier League, across Carabao Cup, across other European matches as well, there's so many fixtures in there that they're going to have to put out a strong 11 for. I do really fear for his minutes moving forward. And even if they did try to start him in as many of these matches as possible, there's a pretty decent chance that he goes down injured again, because it does seem like he's struggling with something. And look, I'm not a physio, far from it, but it doesn't look like he's all that comfortable right now. And if I was trying to read his mind a little bit, I think that he's playing through the injury in the hope that he can get all the way through to the World Cup, make the squad, make the starting 11, because it's obviously a big year for him and his World Cup prospects with England. If he takes the option of having surgery on what seems to be a persistent issue right now, then he's likely not going to be back for quite a while, and he might lose the opportunity at that starting role in the World Cup for England. If Cole Palmer was watching this video, which I'm sure he's not, but if he was for whatever reason, I'd say right now, if you're struggling through injury, you're going to do yourself more harm than good. And look, I might be completely off the mark on this. He might play 90 minutes against Crystal Palace, and he might be excellent. He might be absolutely amazing. And by game week 24, I'm going to want to buy him if he looks much more convincing. But given what we know, given the recent injury struggles, I'm not all that convinced yet. So I, at the very minimum, need another week of information against Crystal Palace. But I think it's pretty unlikely, at time of recording at least, that I'm going to have enough faith in him by game week 24 that I can reliably predict him to get 70 plus, 80 plus minutes a match and look good during those minutes as well, which is the second factor, which against Brentford, it didn't look all that convincing either. A quick word on one Chelsea player that I am a bit more convinced on. That is, of course, Chalobah. In the back line, he has been excellent value for money as a defender this season. Even at 5.5 million, which isn't on the cheap side of defenders, he's still been racking up the points very consistently throughout the season. He's one of those players that every single week, he seems to be able to find a different route to points. Even if Chelsea don't keep a clean sheet, he's still good for a goal every now and then. 3 goals this season. He's picked up the odd assist, obviously one in the Premier League this season as well. And he hits the odd DEFCON. He's also pretty good on the bonus as well. So even if they don't keep a clean sheet, he seems to find a way of returning points. That is exactly what you want from any defender in this game, especially one from a Chelsea backline who have great fixtures coming. And he's about as nailed as a Chelsea pick gets right now. Now, you could opt for Sanchez in goal, bit cheaper. Aren't as many routes to points with a goalkeeper, of course, but he is a little bit cheaper. So nothing against him as a pick either. But I think if you've got the money, Chalobah would be on a wildcard defence for me right now. And with free transfers in the next couple of game weeks, if I'm making any defensive moves, he is right at the top of my list. If you've got Gabriel already, I'd say Chalobah is probably the next in line as a defensive buy right now, given the fixtures are great. He seems pretty nailed. Now, I won't go as far as to say I can 100% guarantee he'll start all of these matches, because Chelsea's fixtures are very congested and there are some important ones in there aside from Premier League. But if there are any defenders who are going to start all the games, he's the most likely. I think he's an excellent player to be looking at buying. Even this week, Crystal Palace have not been great from an attacking point of view. Obviously, we all know the turmoil that they're going through behind the scenes right now. I don't mind it as a buy this week if you're looking for a defender, but certainly from game week 24 onwards, looks like an excellent, excellent pickup. Okay, so let's talk about the Man United midfielders. What a performance against Man City, by the way. Bruno at his free-flowing, attacking best, created 4 big chances, which I think is the most of any player against a Man City side under Pep Guardiola since he joined the club. Absolutely fantastic. What a player. I really miss having him in my FPL team. Ever since I sold him, my rank has started tumbling down. Obviously, he got injured, so I kind of had to sell him, but I'm desperate to get back there as soon as physically possible. Bryan Mbeumo also very, very impressive. I think he goes under the radar somewhat in comparison to Bruno because his data's not quite as good. He's obviously been off at the African Cup of Nations anyway, so people kind of forgot about him a little bit. But also, excellent underlying data, and at a decent price as well. 8.1 million is not bad going. And he was playing very, very advanced, especially on the break. He was the talismanic figure on the break. He's obviously rapid, and he's got a good eye for breaking the offside trap as well. So in any games where they're going to counter, Bryan Mbeumo looks like a sensational, sensational pick. So Arsenal away from home, you'd imagine they're going to be countering quite a lot in that game, or at least trying to. So maybe Mbeumo is possibly even a good buy for this week, considering that they might catch Arsenal on the break. Mbeumo might be the guy to go for. I think what I'm going to say is incredibly boring, so I do apologize for it. And it's probably what a lot of other content creators, FPL YouTubers are going to say. I'd personally probably wait a week. There are a lot of midfielders that I have right now that I do want to get rid of, but they have better fixtures than Man United do this week. Arsenal away, look, both of these players are capable of returning against Arsenal. But if there was ever a week where they were going to blank or more likely to blank, this is the week. Arsenal's defence is exceptional. Can they concede against Man United? Absolutely. They've conceded against other teams this season. They're far from indestructible. But I think you play the odds, especially on quite expensive picks like Bruno, like Mbeumo. They're not cheap, and the players you're selling this week mostly look likely to be pretty good players with decent fixtures. Phil Foden is the popular one. If he was injured and we got news that he was out this week, I think have at it. Even with the Arsenal fixture, it gets a move done that I think a lot of us are going to want to make next week anyway. But if he's fine, which I think he probably will be, I can't really get on board with selling a player at home to Wolves. If he starts, and we might get news he won't, but if he does start and if we think he will, selling a player against Wolves at home, bottom of the league, against a team who are going up against top of the league away from home with the best defensive data in the league, I'm just not sure about it. Next week, absolutely 100% buy these players if you can. At the very least, Bruno Fernandes, 9.2 million. It's not cheap, but his underlying XGI per 90 is amazing. 0.7 is fantastic. The next 5, the expected points is a little bit low via Solio, by the way. Do go check them out if you get the chance. But that's largely because of the Arsenal fixture. Once that's out the way, that jumps up to an average of about 5.8, I think maybe even up to 6 points on average per week. He becomes a captaincy option as well, to be honest. He's on penalties. He's playing more advanced. He's on set pieces. And as we saw against Man City, I think the more advanced role isn't even going to impact the DEFCON all that much. So he's just a brilliant, brilliant pick next week for me. Obviously, go for it this week if you're convinced that you just need to get him immediately. But because my route to him is probably either Bukayo Saka or Phil Foden, I think I'm probably going to wait a week on him. If you've got the transfers to get to both of these players, by the way, I think that would be an excellent differential to consider in Game Week 24 onwards, because I think most of us are probably only going to get one of them, and that will most likely be Bruno Fernandes. If you can also squeeze in Bryan Mbeumo, if you're on a wildcard next week, that's a great opportunity to do so. If you can do it with free transfers, I think that is an excellent move. And I think that that is something that will set you apart from a lot of other FPL teams in the run-in between Game Week 24 and Game Week 31. If you can get them both, I think fantastic. Obviously, it's a very small sample size against Man City, but they did look brilliant. I do wonder how they'll do against Arsenal, but after that's out of the way, it's a great run of fixtures. I expect them to score plenty of goals. Their underlying attacking data was good anyway before Carrick came in, and it looks like he's going to try and take them back to yesteryear with some really fast-paced counter-attacking football. And Mbeumo and Bruno Fernandes are both going to benefit from that, surely. Another Man United player I just quickly wanted to mention is Dorgu, who has been very good value for money recently at 4.3 million. I don't think many of us expected him to start against Man City, let alone in such an advanced position. So that set off alarm bells for pretty much everyone out there looking for a cheap defender, because if he continues to start at left wing at 4.3 million, and that will probably rise, but it's still going to be 4.5 or below, that could be exceptional value for money. And he's a pretty good winger on his day. He's not bad whatsoever in that advanced role. He gets into advanced positions. He arrives late in the box, especially from those crosses and cutbacks. He was there quite a lot in recent game weeks, even before Carrick came in. Obviously, scored the goal against Man City. So 5 attacking returns, decent underlying data. In fact, for a defender, very good underlying data and at a good price. What's the catch? Well, Arsenal away, we've already discussed it. Probably not the best time to be buying. If you've got him already, happy days. I think he'll probably start left wing in that game again, considering it's going to be a tough game for Man United. They want a left winger who's capable of not only pressing and getting forward, but also doing the defensive work and doubling up on Bukayo Saka, who I think will probably start that game. So Dorgu seems perfect, and Cunha will probably be more of an option later on in the game, or for another player, or in different game weeks later on down the line as well. So I think Dorgu's safe for this week. I am worried though, and I'm reluctant to recommend him as a buy, because I think once Arsenal's out of the way, it's open season and we just don't know how Carrick's going to set up in terms of which player is going to be preferred in that left wing role. It is not impossible that Dorgu is only really playing because he can also do the defensive stuff really well as well. Now, he might play really well against Arsenal and earn his starting spot against Fulham. That's perfectly plausible, but it's a risk. So buying him now, if you're going to need to rely on him week in, week out, seems very risky to me, because I can't guarantee you that he's going to keep starting in that advanced position, or that if he loses that left wing role, he's going to definitely start at left back either, because they've obviously got a few fullbacks that they can lean on. And if they're playing back four, Luke Shaw can move over to left back, and he could very easily do a job there over Dorgu. In fact, I think Shaw is probably the one that would be preferred over Dorgu anyway. And of course, they've got other options too. So if you've got him, great. Play him against Arsenal if you want. You're probably not going to get a clean sheet out of it, but you might get an attacking return if he plays advanced yet again, and he's good value for money. I'd be reluctant to recommend him after that, given that they do have a lot of attacking options, and I just can't see a world realistically where Mount, Sesko, Cunha all consistently just continue to get benched ahead of, well, behind someone like Dorgu. Obviously, Mbeumo is going to play, Bruno's going to play. I'm just a bit worried that those players are also, in the easier games, going to get a look in as well. So let's wrap up the video by talking about the player that I've been most frustrated by recently. It has been very hard work defending Bukayo Saka recently as an FPL pick. I still have him in my team. I don't know how, but I do. And him getting benched against Nottingham Forest is something I actually mentioned quite a lot in my videos last week. And I just had a gut feeling that after playing in the Carabao Cup, he obviously played 90 minutes in that maybe Arteta would rotate him out against Nottingham Forest so he was fit and ready for the upcoming run of fixtures that Arsenal have. And yet, I kept him. And I went against my gut instinct and I was punished for it. So I can't sit here and say, oh, I'm wise after the event. Very glad that Saka got benched. I made the move. I'm completely vindicated, because at the end of the day, I chickened out of it. I doubted myself, and he got benched anyway. 1 pointer against Nottingham Forest. Nearly got very lucky by getting a goal from I think it was a Declan Rice cross that he headed towards the back post. It was a good save in the end, and that would have got me out of jail a little bit. But 2 benchings in the last 3 game weeks. Arteta has since come out and said that he's been managing a little bit of a knock, which might show us why he's not played as many minutes recently as we might have expected, or maybe got an extra rest in there more than we would have previously expected. But I think one thing is very clear. If Bukayo Saka is ever near the red zone, and we talk about the red zone quite a lot on this channel, when a player is playing a little bit too much, physios will take a look and say, okay, we might need to take them out of the firing line, make sure that we don't aggravate an injury or an existing knock, or maybe even bring on an injury just through overplaying them. Saka seems to now be one of those players where in the past, he almost played 90 minutes regardless, and I think Arteta didn't really care about running him into the ground. The story has changed. If Saka is close to the red zone, if he's a bit tired from a previous match, if he's got a slight knock that previously they would have played him through, now, because they've got Madueke, I think he's just going to get rested. Unless it's a very, very important match, which they will, of course, try to play Saka for, I think we're now looking at every single game week wondering, is this the week that Saka drops out, Madueke plays, and therefore Saka gets the rest? So, with that in mind, is he an immediate sell? No, I don't think he is. And that's the most frustrating thing for me, because I can already see the comments coming in. I can already feel myself almost making the mistake week on week. And it's sunk cost fallacy for me at the end of the day, because I've probably lost value in him. I can't actually remember what price I bought him at, but I've still got him in my team. He's a lot of money. And the data, if he's playing, is very, very good. So, if I think he starts against Man United, which I think he does, I really think he does. I can't see why they wouldn't play him in such an important match. If he does, I think objectively versus Declan Rice, who is the obvious alternative, much cheaper and honestly better value for money. If I was wildcarding, I'd pick Declan Rice. But is it worth the transfer if I think specifically this game week, Saka is going to start and probably going to get good minutes against Man United? I think if I knew both of their minutes were the same against Man United, I'd still prefer Saka, unless that extra money was going to be put to good use elsewhere immediately. So if I was taking Saka down to Declan Rice, I could spend that 2+ million on maybe upgrading, I don't know, Szoboszlai to Bruno Fernandes. That would be an amazing upgrade. Absolutely fine. The only caveat there is Bruno Fernandes has an awful fixture this week, and therefore that puts me off a little bit from making that double swap. So I think with Saka, it's a week-to-week thing where I try to judge whether or not he's going to get a rest that week. If I don't think he does, and if I think the minutes are strong, I hold on to him for another week. And for game week 23, specifically against Man United, I think I'm going to hold on to him and just hope, pray that this week is the week that he finally pays off the money that he costs, and the fact that the data is really good. He's just not been recently getting the attacking returns. I just really hope now that he's a bit more differential, and holding on to him arguably for too long, and I make no qualms about it. I can't disagree. He's been an awful pick recently, and I feel like I'm like the last person left who's still holding on to this man, still got faith. In a way, I don't even have that much faith. I am going to get rid of him soon. I'm sure of it. But if I think he starts the next game week, and I will keep saying that week on week with my team selection, if I think he starts, he probably stays unless I need that money elsewhere. This week, I don't need the money elsewhere, and I do think he starts. So I'm going to hold on to him. So 1 pointer incoming. Don't say I didn't warn you, I suppose, because I'm holding on to him. Probably means he's going to get benched again, but I'm going to take the risk. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it. Hit subscribe if you're new around here as well. And I'll see you for my team selection in a day or two.